Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this informal meeting of the Joint Audit and Standards Committee. I am Councillor Bryn Hurren, and I will be chairing this meeting today. The decision to hold an informal meeting has been taken as a result of the current risks relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. As this meeting is now an informal meeting, members will not be able to make decisions, and therefore there will be no voting on any items on the agenda. Members are asked to debate the items on the agenda and to confirm a steer for each item, which will be recorded, and decisions may then be taken by officers or the leader under delegation, depending on the decision. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may have to be asked to leave. Please remember to use the chat function only to indicate that you wish to speak and not to post comments or questions. Please note that messages in the chat panel may be viewed by people watching the live broadcast. I would like to remind everyone present that this informal meeting is broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of these images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. As for introductions, I will now ask the Governance Officer to carry out the introductions. Mandy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I believe the officers in attendance today are Rebecca Hewitt, who will be presenting our first item, Catherine Steele, who will be presenting our third item, and Emily Yule, who's the monitoring officer. We do have other officers in attendance, but they are Democratic Services officers.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. Do we have any apologies, please?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Could I receive declaration of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members? Are there any to declare? No, I can't see any hands raised. Thank you. Notification of petitions. Are there any, Mandy?
None, Chair.
Thank you. Questions by the public?
None.
Or questions by councillors?
No, none received.
Thank you. I will now move to the main body of the meeting. Item 6, paper IRJA 2115, Joint Capital Investment and Treasury Management. And I think Rebecca Hurt, you're going to introduce this for us, please. Go ahead.
Apologies, Chair. Councillor Barrett has her hand up.
Yep. Sorry, Melanie. Yes.
Sorry, just before we do start on that, could I just mention the minutes from the 27th of November, which we often agree are accurate before going on to the main body.
As this is an informal meeting, we're unable to take any formal votes, so those minutes will be taken to the next meeting.
Right. Just I do have something to note on those. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is it something urgent, Melanie, or will it wait?
I'm sure it will wait. It's not going to change anything. So yes, I'll make a note of that for next time. Thank you.
Fine. Yep. Thank you. Back to Rebecca then, please. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the Joint Capital Investment and Treasury Management Strategies for 2022-23. This report There have been no significant changes in format this year from previous years, and it has been updated to reflect the latest capital expenditure, investment and borrowing, and the latest Treasury management investment and borrowing positions of the councils. Under the Cifco Treasury Management Code of Practice and the Prudential Code, both published in 2021, and investment guidance published in 2018, we are required to determine separate capital investment and treasury management strategy statements and prudential indicators annually before the start of each financial year. I'll just now quickly run you through the appendices. So in Appendix A, we have the capital strategy, which summarises the capital expenditure and financing requirements of the full capital programme for both the General Fund and the HRA, the details of which are in the budget report. This sets out capital expenditure and investment decisions and the associated risks and rewards, along with how risk is managed for future financial sustainability. It includes the prudential indicators which demonstrate that the investment plans for the councils are affordable, prudent and sustainable, and that decisions are made in accordance with good practice. This shows that capital expenditure planned for 22-23, including carry forwards, is 41.1 million for BABA, of which 22.9 will be funded by borrowing, and 68.2 million for Mid Suffolk, of which 52.6 million will be funded by borrowing. Limits and boundaries for borrowing are set as part of the prudential indicators. The strategy shows that projected borrowing will not exceed these limits. Appendix B is the investment strategy. This details those expenditure items in the capital programme that specifically relate to assets bought and or owned by the councils purely or partially to generate a return. This does include schemes which have the purpose of regeneration or development as well as generating a return. In the context of this strategy, investments means those non-treasury management activities. These are defined as two types of investments. So we have service provision, where the councils lend to or buy shares in organisations that provide a service, such as Gateway 14 for the purpose of regeneration and economic development. And we also have investments for yield, where the primary purpose is to generate a return, such as the council-owned company Sifko. The strategy explains how each investment contributes to the council's priorities and their security, liquidity and risk. It shows the projected total investments of the councils in Cifco, the growth companies and Gateway 14, and also planned expenditure on the council's property held, at least in part, for investment purposes. Appendix C is the Treasury Management Strategy for 22-23. It sets out the Council's borrowing requirement and borrowing and Treasury Management investment strategies. This also includes the list of approved counterparties and limits. There's been no significant change to limits since last year. Appendix D is the Treasury Management indicators, which we use to measure and manage the Council's exposure to Treasury Management risks. And Appendix E is an economic update and interest rate forecast. The ongoing impact on the UK from COVID-19, together with higher inflation, the likelihood of higher interest rates, and the Council's trade position post-Brexit will be major influences on the Council's Treasury Management strategy for 22-23. The authority's Treasury Management Advisor Arlene Close is forecasting that Bank of England base rate will rise to 0.5% in the first quarter of 2022 and remain at this level until at least the final quarter of 2024. The risks to the forecast are initially weighted to the upside, but becoming more balanced over time. Appendix F shows the current investment and debt portfolio with the position at 30th of November 2021. BABA's borrowing is currently 118.7 million, of which 94.7 million is PWLB and 24 million is short term. For Mid Suffolk, the level is 132.9 million. 105.4 of which is long term and 27.5 million short term. On the investment side, BABA has 21.6 million and Mid Suffolk 19.75 million, including CCLA, UBS, Schroders, Investec and Funding Circle. We have continued the policy of withdrawing funds from Funding Circle as loans drop out, and we have not invested any new money. Appendix B sets out the Treasury Management Policy Statement, which underpins the strategy and sets out both councils' regard to the monitoring of risk and performance. Appendix H contains the minimum revenue provision statement, which shows the basis on how we put aside resources to repay debt in later years. I must apologise, but since this report was published for this meeting, we have received some feedback from our Treasury advisors, Arling Close, and updated figures with more recent information resulting from work on the budget and links to the budget report. There are some changes which will be included in the strategies taken to Council in February, which I will now take you through. Most of the changes are to provide more clarity around the Council service investments and commercial investments. Commercial investments are primarily for financial return, and under the new 2021 Prudential Code, an authority must not borrow to invest primarily for financial return. So I'll take you through these changes now. So in Appendix A for the capital strategy, in paragraph 2.12, there is a statement that has been added in that the Section 151 officer considers that none of these projects count as investment assets primarily for yield under the PWLB lending arrangements, nor as investments primarily for financial return under the Cifco Prudential Code. Paragraph 4.5 under Appendix A, Table 6. This is the prudential indicator for gross debt and capital financing requirement. These have been reformatted to show the headroom for both the HRA and general fund separately for both borrowing and the CFR. So for BABA, 3.27 million of the headroom in each year relates to the HRA, with the remainder for the general fund, and for Mid-Suffolk, 24.98 million from 22-23 onwards relates to the HRA, and the revised tables will show this separately from the general fund. Still in Appendix A, paragraph 4.10, Table 7, the borrowing and the liability benchmark. We had some advice from our Treasury Management advisors, Arling Close, that only existing debt should be included and not expected debt from future capital expenditure within this indicator. So this has increased the gap between the actual borrowing and the liability benchmark. Paragraph 4.12 in Appendix A, Table 8, Prudential Indicators. The ratios have been corrected as they had been previously miscalculated. So for 22-23, it's now 67.6%, 23-24, 69.4%, 24-25 now 71.6%, and 25.6, 72.2%. Within the same appendix, paragraph 4.1, the charts showing the borrowing compared to the CFR liability benchmark have now been updated for the same amendment in paragraph 4.10, so for only including existing borrowing and not future planned borrowing, as advised by our Treasury advisors. Paragraph in Appendix B, the Joint Investment Strategy, paragraph 1.2 has been added to distinguish between investments for purely commercial purposes and investments for regeneration. So it's been added to say both councils are working to complete housing developments, including the sites of the formal council offices in Hadley and Needham Market, through the council's trading companies, BABA Growth Limited and Mid-Suffolk Growth Limited. Mid-Suffolk has also invested in its subsidiary Gateway 14 Limited for the purposes of regeneration and economic development. For a similar reason, paragraph 3.3, table 1, the Hadley A1071 roadside commercial workspace development, we have renamed A1071 economic development to clarify that this is not a purely commercial investment, but also has economic development purposes. Then in Appendix B, paragraph 9.5, Table 6, investments net rate of return. The latest Gateway 14 forecast figures for 23, 24 to 25, 26 have been updated in the Mid-Suffolk table. So this is now showing in 23-24 it's 5.3%, 24-25 5.77%, and in 25-26 6.69%. Finally, in Appendix C, in the Joint Treasury Management Strategy, in paragraph 3.3, Table 1, similar to some of the other amendments, the BABA's external borrowing figures have been corrected to include existing borrowing only. So external borrowing has reduced by 14 million in 21-22 to 25-26. Okay, so that's all from me. So happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Lot to go through there. I think for ease, I'll probably split the appendices out. Maybe Appendix A, questions on that, then B, then C, because that is the main bulk of the papers. And then the following ones maybe all together, just for clarity. I note what you say, Rebecca, and the additions will all be put in when I present this to full council, won't they?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
there is quite a lot. I hope that members can just remember them or made note as I have. I was going to highlight 4.6 and 4.7 in your summary, Rebecca, that investment for gain is no longer really encouraged. In fact, it seems to be quite frowned upon, isn't it? But what we have invested, that's okay. That's safe. We don't have to rejig that in any way, I take it.
No, we don't. No, it's just future investment.
Yep. Okay, thanks very much. So let's take questions on Appendix A first, just for clarity. I've got Dave and then James. Dave first, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Rebecca, referring to the table on capital expenditure on page 12, I noticed the actual outturn for capital investments 2021 was 21.32 million, yet the forecast outturn for 2021-22 is only 4.11 million. Is there any particular reason for that vast difference, please?
I would have to take that away, I'm afraid, and have a look into that.
Yes.
Unless Catherine's got it.
I'll say I might be able to assist with that question, Chair. My thinking is that it's linked to the final investment in Sifko, right. Because we did the final investment of the second tranche of 25 million in 2021, so that would have been a higher level of capital expenditure that year compared to the current financial year.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you, Chair.
And I had James, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the next page, page 13, the table 2. When we have grants and also external contribution predictions for years up to the 25th to 25-26, how are we knowing that we're going to get some? And well, I assume the ones that are on zero, there could potentially be grants, but we don't know what they are yet, so that's a very difficult one. But when we've got forecast grants, like maybe the first one there, BABA 0.76 up until 25-26, what is that, and how do we know we're going to get it?
Yep. Okay. So I believe that's 0.76 is the disabled facilities grant that we get on a regular basis for doing disabled adaptations to properties. So that is a regular ongoing grant that we get from central government, which is why we have included that.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. On page 19, well, it's table 8 on page 9. Well, it's 4.12. We're looking at the sort of £15 million buffer, where we the authorised limit. Where do we get £15 million for, and how do we come to that figure? It seems a lot of money. So yeah, could you just give me a bit of background to that, please?
Yes, certainly. So the operational boundary is linked to our capital financing requirement. For the authorised limit, we put the £15 million on as a, as you say, as a buffer for cash flow purposes. So it may be that we're waiting for a grant to come in, or we have to pay out money in advance of getting income in. So that authorised limit has been set. I don't know if Catherine has any further information on why it's 15 million.
I don't think it's a mathematical calculation. It's just based on our level of borrowing, and like you say, to give us that headroom should there be any sort of unexpected circumstances that arise, that we just need that extra ability. My experience probably for a number of years is I don't think we tend to even go above our operational boundary. So we haven't had to invoke that authorised limit, but it is there just to give us some, as you say, some headroom and a bit of a buffer so that we don't have to come back to council in managing, you know, the day-to-day treasury management of the council. So it just gives us that flexibility should we need it. But say my experience is we haven't needed to use it in the past.
Right. So yeah, so that could easily have been 1 million for the last few years, and it wouldn't have made any difference to anything. Yeah, we're not going into it. OK, thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Mary, your question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Oh. Trying to bring the right, there we are, we're working. Morning, Rebecca.
Morning.
I've got two questions related to item 9 in Appendix A, which is about the knowledge and skills that we purchase. My first question is that those, I mean, there's 10 subcontractors listed there. Why can we not develop some of those? I know you can't develop all skills, but the first question is, why can we not develop some of those skills in-house?
Okay.
Do you want me to start with that one, Rebecca? Some of these are very specialist, and it's not, I suppose, cost effective usually for us to have somebody, and to be honest, it's sometimes very difficult to recruit to a local authority those types of skills. We have a certain number of skills in-house. I mean, we have, you know, Emily Atack, as you know, has a vast range of knowledge and experience, certainly in the property sector. But there are some times where we just need that extra expertise. As for Treasury management, we use Arling Close, you know, who are operating in the market every day. So with some of our other developments or investments, certainly on the property side, you know, in terms of Sifko, then we have always brought in that specialist expertise, because yes, we might want to try and develop some of that, but it does take many years, doesn't it, to get to that level of expertise that we're wanting to rely on. So I know certainly in Emily Atack's area, she has brought more staff on board that have got more of those skills. So it may be, you know, in time that we can rely a bit less on some of those external consultants. But obviously the nature of what we were entering into, we wanted to make sure that the council had the right advice, you know, in terms of those investments. So I think it's always a balance, to be honest, in terms of what you can develop internally, and, you know, whether that's needed 100% of the time, or whether it is, say, more cost effective to purchase the advice when you need it.
So thank you, Catherine. My second question then follows on from that. Do we have a sort of combined cost for, because obviously we're still retaining these people in the forthcoming years. So for 22-23, do we have a projected cost of what these external contractors are going to charge us?
I don't have that information. I'm guessing Rebecca probably won't either, because some of that goes through the companies. And that obviously goes through their accounts, so we don't have absolute visibility of all of that detail. It's a question we could take away and see whether we could provide a bit more information for the committee.
Well, it would be interesting. I mean, I was just thinking how much it was, because in fact these subcontractors are just the elitist group, if you like, aren't they, of lots of other subcontractors. And it would be interesting to know actually how much we pay subcontractors for the whole count. Well, obviously for Baber District Council, as far as I'm concerned. So
I was going to say it's quite a difficult figure to get to, because it is, I say, it's scattered across all of the service areas and the companies as well. But we'll take that question away and see if we could pull something together.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mary. Mike, please. Mike Norris, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have two questions. I'm looking at page 16, estimates of capital financing requirement, and in the mid-Suffolk section, bottom line, totals, comparing 2021/22 forecast outturn, 194 million, to a 2022-23 budget, 245 million. I can see that the HRA line has also jumped up, but are there any other factors in that?
Yes, certainly. So within the capital investments, a chunk of that will be related to Gateway 14 and planned expenditure on that project. I think that will be the biggest element of that.
Yes, I expected that actually, yes. Okay, thank you. And the second question I have relates to page 22. Bear with me while I just find it on my other screen. Paragraph 7.2, proportion of financing cost to net revenue stream. Comparing Baber, which starts off at 18.26% and then declines to 14.21%, whereas Mid-Suffolk starts off at 19.17% and then increases year on year up to 38.11%. Is there a simple answer to that?
Okay, thank you for the question. I don't know if there is a simple answer. Again, I think that will be partly influenced by Gateway 14 and the way that the income reduces in later years, but I'd probably have to take that one away.
Okay.
And have a look at that one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. No more questions I can see generally. Rebecca, Catherine, I wondered if we could have a comment on 6.1, the pension deficit. There's lots of new councillors here who may not be aware. The deficit for Baber is 28 million, Mid-Suffolk 40. Does this affect final payout salaries? I can't believe it does, and I can see we're due to put some in, but I think my question is, will we ever catch up, and how? I wonder if you could just give us a brief sort of appraisal of this, please. It's worrying for me, but probably not for you. Can you reassure us?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Yeah, the pension deficit has been there for a number of years, and it fluctuates, to be honest, depending on what the stock market is doing. Because we have what are called triennial valuations of the pension fund. The last one was in 2019. and at that point the actual valuation of the fund had improved, so it had got closer to 100% in terms of its funding. The next one is due as at March 22, so not that far away at the moment. And at the moment, the stock market is looking quite good. So I think everyone is perhaps anticipating that this next valuation of the pension funds will improve it again. And I know one or two funds, even at the last valuation, had finally reached the 100% funding limit. So based on where we're currently at, then over the last 3 years, we have been able to make a small reduction in our contribution each year. The figure that we put in the accounts is sort of a very much a snapshot in time as at the 31st of March of each particular financial year. But yes, the funds generally, I think both ours and across the country, are moving in the right direction because employers have put these extra contributions in over a number of years now. And just picking up your point about does it affect the final payments? No, it doesn't. The local authority pension scheme is such that it's a defined benefit scheme. So irrespective of the money that is in the fund at the point any person retires, then what their benefits are paid is determined by statute, in fact, by the National Local Government Pension Scheme for local authorities. Hopefully that answers your question, Chair, and gives you some reassurance perhaps of the direction of travel that we're going in.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. It's sort of as I expected. We all know investments go down as well as up, so we hope for the latter and dread the former. Okay, that's something to be kept an eye on, because obviously if it gets too far out, we may be expected to make up the difference or supplement it. Thank you. That's pretty clear, and hope for everybody else as well. Mike, is that an old hand, or you've taken it down now? Any more questions on Appendix A, members? No. Move to Appendix B then. Page 25. Any points or questions on that before we go to discussion? Anybody? I think I had one while I'm waiting for the hands to come up, if they do. No, mine was on Appendix C. Anything on Appendix B, anybody? No, we'll take that as read then. Appendix C, page 37. James, would you like to kick off, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really sorry. Could we go back to Appendix B, because I've got all these papers printed out and in different sections all over my desk, and it just took me a while to get to where I was on Appendix B.
That's fine, James. Of course you can. I was trying to make it easy, and I probably made it hard. But yeah.
No, you were fine. I was very slow, Mr. Chairman. We had an update on the Sifko. I didn't quite catch exactly where Rebecca said that the update was. She couldn't just go through the changes to the Sifko. Yeah. Do you know what I mean, Rebecca?
Let's have a look. So for Sifko, I don't believe there were any changes to the numbers for Sifko within Appendix B.
Oh, okay. So there's no changes to those. No, that's absolutely
no
fine.
changes to the numbers. I think there was some wording to tighten up to clarify that we weren't investing any further in it, but no changes to the figures for Sifko.
Right. Okay. I thought I didn't get it down in time, but no, there wasn't. So thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, James. Have you anything in Appendix C?
No, I'll just go through it now and just have a look. But
Yeah,
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Rebecca, just from me, we're expecting a rise in interest rates, aren't we? And it possibly could go quite steep. I heard you mention 0.5%. If it went up to say 0.1, what difference would that make? Because obviously we've got more borrowing than investments, haven't we? You know, could you give me a ballpark figure of what a rise like that, what difference it would make on the plus and minus columns?
Yes, I don't have those figures to hand.
It's just I rather feel by the end of this year that could be possibly the sort of rates we're at, and I just wondered if you've thought about that. Basically, if that's too much plucking out of the sky, Rebecca, you know, come back to me in writing afterwards, maybe. But I just feel it's something by the end of this coming financial year we could be dealing with, and maybe we just ought to be aware of that.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you. James has shuffled his papers again. Do you have a question, James, on Appendix C, please?
I think, yeah, we were about 140 pages for these two items on the agenda. So sorry, I just
no, that's fine.
My system got a little bit out of shape. So we talk about in Appendix C 5.9 the negative interest rates, which we've had in there for a couple of years now. But do you think that's still something relevant that we need to be thinking about now?
Thank you for your question. I think now we've recognised that it is much less likely than perhaps it was during the initial part of the COVID pandemic. We have still left it in for information so that we have the clarity over what would happen if we were in that instance in the future, but I do believe that is now across the market seen as unlikely.
Yeah, I do wonder if it's time for that to come out, but I know it doesn't do any harm being in, but I don't think it's particularly relevant, but thank you very much.
Okay,
thank you, James. I don't have any more questions on this, so I'll invite questions for appendices D, E, F and G. That's everything else. They're smaller appendices, but I'm sure somebody may have picked up something. Dave, yes, far away.
Yeah, just a quickie, thank you, Chair. On Appendix F on page 62, this is the existing borrowing and investments. Treasury investments, banks and building societies, where we've invested 1.62 million, but the average percentage rate is 0. Which seems, is that because they're like a current account and there's no interest paid on that account? I noticed we've got 0.01 on money market funds and 5.03 on other pooled funds. I was just really curious why that was a 0% on the banks and building societies, please, Rebecca.
Yep, certainly. We've said they are generally, I think that's the DMADF fund primarily from central government, and that has had very, very low rates. It has actually been 0 for most of this year, so that is why that is there. That is sort of our account of last resort as a safe place when all our money market funds are full. So that is just very low, very, very low rates at this time.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Is there anything else from anyone else in all the rest of the papers on this paper? No, that looks like everyone is reasonably happy. Well, we cannot vote, but I'm looking for a steer that everybody's happy on the recommendations at 3.1 to 3.7. Is it your wish that we accept what we've all read and discussed? Or does anyone want to have more of a discussion on this? We're in the discussion mode now. Any hands, please? Yes, I've got Dave and then Mary. Dave, let's hear from you first.
Yeah, I'm broadly happy with the recommendations as stated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Mary next.
Yes, I'm very happy with it. And just sort of comment on the work that's gone in by the team, because it's been the most horrendous 2 years, hasn't it? And so all credit to the Section 151 officer and all her team with the work that's gone into this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mary. Mike, you wish to make a comment?
Well, yes, I would also like to commend the officers. It must have been a bit of a nightmare, actually, I think, pulling these figures together for this last year. And I'm quite happy to go with the recommendations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Well, we don't need a proposer or a seconder for this, just general agreement that we're on the right track. These figures will be amended a little, as Rebecca pointed out, for the full council meetings, but all being that, I think we have a good steer to go forward. Thank you very much, everybody. Now, item 7, JAC 2116, adoption of the new Suffolk Code of Conduct that we all have to obey. Emily, can you introduce this, please? I can see you're smiling. It's power, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors.
Good morning.
I'm pleased to introduce this report, which asks the committee to recommend that the full councils adopt the new Local Government Association Model Code of Conduct. As the committee will be aware, this model code is being developed by the Local Government Association following the recommendations by the Committee on Standards in Public Life. There has been significant national consultation with councillors and monitoring officers, and sector experts have been involved in drafting both the revised code and the supporting guidance. The main features and alterations to the new model code are outlined in the body of the report. There have been no changes to the sanctions available to the monitoring officer, as this would require legislative change, and currently there is really no appetite from the government to make those changes. The Suffolk Monitoring Officers Group have discussed this revised code at length and are recommending it to each of the county, district and borough councils in terms of each of those councils adopting the code in full, so as published by the LGA. We will also be recommending, alongside the Suffolk Association of Local Councils, that town and parish councils in Suffolk also adopt the new model code. And this will ensure that we continue to have a consistent code of conduct across all tiers of local authorities in Suffolk, which, as I've mentioned to this committee before, is really important, both for me as monitoring officer, given that I investigate code of conduct complaints across town and parish councils and the district councils, but also for those councillors who represent more than one authority, so that there is consistency and that there's a common understanding of the code of conduct. Chairman, I'm very happy to answer any questions that committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I think I should perhaps remind everybody that we are Audit and Standards Committee, so we do have a responsibility. We don't try our own, but obviously if somebody from neighbouring councils steps over the line, it can come to us to investigate this matter fully and try and recommend some, I won't say punishments, please don't do it again sort of rules. And we have done that in the past, so I have a fairly good understanding of what is required, I think, because the ones we've had I've always chaired, and I think we've always had a very good result. Mainly people have to apologise, sometimes in front of their councils, which I think is a good outcome, and they make a commitment not to do it again. So there are some teeth behind this. I sometimes think for the real nasty one, shall I say, the punishment maybe should be a bit more, but we're limited what we can do. But we do have a responsibility for standards as well. I've read through the paper and I've got nothing to add to it, Emily. It's absolutely excellent. I think it covers everything. I'm a bit concerned sometimes about the parishes. They tend to forget. We're a bit more responsible, but they can easily forget and sometimes do. But hopefully it will all turn out well. Right, questions, James and then Mary. James first, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I was going to say a similar thing here, because obviously this is this code of conduct isn't the council's work. This is something we're looking to adopt, that many other councils have adopted it already, and it's a good piece of work. I looked through this, and I think everything in here I completely agree with, and morally I think yes, it's exactly the way we should be behaving as councillors. It's good to have it in print though, to make sure that as a sort of guideline. I was interested in the gifts and hospitality section, where a councillor needs to register a gift even if they refuse it, which seems quite an interesting concept, really, because obviously if there's a register somewhere saying lots of gifts have been offered but not taken, you could easily damage a councillor's reputation when not necessarily when they're absolutely is doing everything exactly like they should. But that was the only part of this. But obviously, that is in a situation where somebody's trying to bring about the downfall of a councillor. It just give them a way of doing it. But I think that's a bit far-fetched. But yeah, really good. And going through it, I will happily adopt this as a council member. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Do you want to comment on that aspect, Emily? Because I think that is a slightly strange one. I can see why it's in there.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's really a provision that actually exists in officer code of conducts already. So officers are required to declare gifts that are not accepted, and it's really that transparency element. So, if somebody is, if a third party is trying to offer a gift for their own gain, this is to protect the council and the councillor by saying, it was offered but refused. So in many ways, I think it's a positive thing, and I think as monitoring officer, I would see it as a sign of good behaviour on behalf of a councillor that they had refused gifts, opposed to seeing it as something that could be used to discredit or undermine a councillor. So I think it's all part of that transparency code, and the reality is that it would come up very rarely in any case, because councillors are not very often offered gifts and hospitality in any case.
I was offered a turkey once many years ago, which I refused, but not much has come my way. Also, I suppose, Emily, if one person was constantly offering gifts to councillors across the board, it would flag up. We need to be alert about that person, wouldn't it? So
That's right.
I take that on board as well. Mary.
Morning, Emily.
Morning.
I loved it, actually. I thought it was brilliant. But I've got two questions, really. One is, where are we in the scheme of, say, all the Suffolk councils? Are we ahead of the game in accepting this, or have other councils beaten us to it?
So we're all trying to coordinate our meetings so that we can achieve adoption at approximately the same time. But obviously each council has got a different schedule of meetings and may have a different route in. So some councils have a committee that they would go to before council, and others would go straight to council. The idea or the timetable that we're working to is that the principal councils would adopt the code by March, and this is particularly relevant for Ipswich Borough Council, who elect in thirds and do have elections in May, and then the town and parish councils could adopt the code in May at their annual town and parish council meetings.
Thank you. Now, the second thing, I'm not sure it's a question or a statement. I am like Bryn, I am concerned not about every parish council, but about the very small parish councils. I identified 4 areas that could actually deter them from actually having the training, especially. I don't know if you've got a view. How can I, as a ward member, enable or empower my parish councils to achieve this code? Because for one of my parishes, it is impossible for them to actually adopt this for various reasons, because they can't actually access the training and perhaps don't have the money for the money, the time, and for training is just impossible for some parish councils. How do we as ward members and as this committee try and influence that? Thank you.
So in lots of ways, the code isn't that far removed from the code that town and parish councils have already adopted. So we already have the Suffolk-wide local code of conduct, and many of the provisions are either the same or very similar. But what this new code does is it provides further contexts and description to what those provisions mean, and particularly the guidance notes give examples of how the code would be applied and how it would be interpreted. So there's some real benefits to taking this enhanced version, if you like. In terms of training, we'll be working very closely with the Suffolk Association of Local Councils to provide training, and some councils will, as members of that group, already have access to that training. We're also thinking as a group of monitoring officers about how we could run training, whether that might be through recording some training or through e-learning. So trying to make lots of different ways for councillors to access training, to access the guidance, and in ways that are accessible and relatively cheap. And also bearing in mind that not every council has a proper officer, a parish clerk that works for a larger number of hours and has the capacity themselves to roll out the training. So we're looking at different ways to do that and to support parish councils. And we're also thinking about particular parish councils who might need some additional support. We would go out to them on a one-to-one basis. So trying to kind of cover all areas and support all sizes of parish councils to adopt the same code. But we will be having those conversations with them in the lead up to them adopting it as well.
I would welcome that, Emily. That is very good for parish councils. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mary. Just sticking with that, Emily, it might be quite good to brief district councillors more that when they go out to their parishes, we probably ought to be doing it sort of as of next month and warning them it's coming and trying to convince them that it's beneficial to have it. I think that would be a good strategy as well. You may be planning it anyway, because I know you're sort of on the ball, but that might be an additional string to the bow, I would think. Mike, please.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that in this code, the threshold for declaration of receipt of gifts has been increased from £25 to £50. I've just been trying to find what I'm just about to refer to on my other screen, and that is that I had a feeling, I can't find it now, I had a feeling that there was some reference to the cumulative value of gifts in any one period. Am I correct on that? Thank you.
Yes, I think you're right, Councillor Norris. There is it's not just the value of a single gift, it's also if you receive lots of small value gifts from the same giver, then you should also declare that as a value over £50.
Thank you, Emily. Can I just clarify, when you said from the same giver, but if you get a lot of small gifts from different people over the same period, whether it be 12 months or whatever, does that also count?
I don't think that's captured. I can go back to the guidance and have a look at that, but I think it is if you receive multiple gifts from the same person or the same organisation.
Yeah.
What I would say, though, is that actually we encourage our members to record all gifts, no matter what the value, just for that absolute transparency and openness.
That's right, I'm aware of that one. Yes, it was just to clarify this cumulative gifts angle, whether it was from different givers over is it every 12 months, presumably, on this declaration? Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. If you can just come back on that one, at that point, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
I will do.
That's all. Thank you.
You're happy to receive that out of meeting, are you, Mike?
Sorry, yes, indeed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, that's good. Yes. Melanie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Emily, I just an interesting area for me is thinking about the defining the code for members that are still in employment or self-employment, and the sort of spillover between those two areas, where there might be a public element to their work. A lot of employment we wouldn't have any sort of insight into at all and how they conduct themselves, but some employment might. And can we expect to extend that code into how they conduct themselves within their other employment, where it might reflect on their work as counsellor or our counsel? So any thoughts on that and how that can be applied? It's a sort of boundary, difficult boundary to draw, isn't it? But how can we address that?
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. That's a really interesting point, because obviously there will be some professions where there's also a professional code that the person adheres to, and there may be some overlap or some kind of that code supersedes the code of conduct. But the critical point here, it comes back to the capacity test. So the initial test that we ask ourselves when a code of conduct complaint is received is, does the code apply in terms of, was the counsellor acting in an official capacity at the time that the alleged behaviour occurred? And this new model code of conduct actually widens that capacity test. So almost under the current code, the presumption would be that you were not acting as a counsellor unless it was very clear that you were acting in that capacity. So either that the behaviour occurred at a council meeting, or when you were on particular council business, or when you were writing using the council's social media or something like that. The shift that has shifted under this new model code to say, actually, you will be presumed to be acting as a counsellor wherever there is any link to your role as a counsellor, or wherever an ordinary person would see your that activity or what you're writing on social media to come from your perspective as a counsellor. So it widens that capacity test. So I think more often you would be captured by the code than not, but it still does create that separation of, if you're doing something in a purely personal capacity or a purely professional capacity, it wouldn't necessarily be captured by the code of conduct, if that makes sense. So it's a wider definition of capacity, but it still does allow for that separation of roles.
So I'm just thinking of if someone is using a social media or that sort of platform, and they're mostly using it in one capacity, perhaps as a counsellor to highlight issues, would that then mean that most of what they post and talk about is reflecting on their role as a counsellor then? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if it's a let's take social media as an example, because I think that's where it most commonly comes up about this question of capacity. If it's a social media account that clearly identifies that person as a counsellor, you know, they tend to use it for council business. You know, the assumption would be that is captured by the code of conduct. If it's a personal account, but the counsellor posts something where they would only know about that issue because they are a counsellor, or they're very clearly giving their view as a counsellor, that would also be captured, even though it's from a personal social media account.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. That's good.
Thank you, Melanie. That's a very difficult one, isn't it? I feel, you know, what about if a counsellor works, say, for a parish council? It's obviously separate billing. That could be an issue as well at some point, couldn't it? Mm-hmm. Do you have a view on that, Emily?
Thanks, Chair. I think, again, my advice would be about openness and transparency in respect of wearing those different hats or having different roles. And so part of that is obviously completing the register of interest to clearly demonstrate any employment that you have or other roles on other boards or bodies. But also just being very clear when you're communicating or you know, when you're representing views at a meeting, for example, you know, I'm here as the district councillor, or I am here as the parish council employee. So just being very clear and transparent about trying to separate those roles wherever possible, and also just being very aware of when conflicts could arise and stepping away from any decisions where a councillor might be conflicted or might not be able to approach that with an open mind because of their other role.
Yes, I think of supplying things to parish councils, etc., as a business, but which is something I do. I might provide a notice board for a parish council, you see, but it's definitely for my business and build as such, and I think they're all right. And I never put vote for Bryn all over them when I deliver them. So I think I do manage to keep everything very separate. Okay, everybody. Any more questions? And as to the decision part, is it your wish that we accept this? And when will this go to Council, Melanie? Will this? It's not on next week's one. It'll be February when it goes to Baber and Mid-Suffolk. Is that correct?
It will come to the March full council meetings.
Oh, March. Okay, fine then. Okay, fine. Dave?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy with the recommendations as quoted in the papers. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, that goes for me also, Emily, very much so. And I know you don't need a proposal in a second, but if you want two people to give it a good, clean bill of health, you can take it from me as well, having read through all of it. I see you put your hand up, Mike, and then put it down again. I assume you're just endorsing that. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much, Mike, for your support. Okay, then. Well, that's agreed, Emily, that this goes to the March full council meeting with a clean bill of health. Apart from maybe my comment that maybe it needs as much publicity to get it through the parish councils as we can possibly give it, which you've already agreed. So I'm very, very happy with that. Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
We move now to item 8, arrangement for the appointment of external auditors. And I think, Catherine, you're going to just take us through this one. So if you like to fire ahead, please. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. And just to say, just on the back of the last conversation you were having, this recommendation will go into the February council meeting. I'll just explain that in a moment rather than the March one. So just a short introduction on the report. Our current 5-year external audit contract was let by the public sector audit appointments following a national procurement, and the councils both opted to join that in 2016. Our current contract through that includes the audit of our 2022-23 accounts, and since 2018-19 both councils' auditor has been Ernst & Young, and that has been the case for all of the other councils in Suffolk as well. So we now need to decide and let PSAA know by the 11th of March. And that's why I was saying this one needs to go into council in February if we again wish to join the national procurement exercise that they're undertaking to let a further 5-year contract. So you're being asked to consider this morning and make a recommendation to council because this is a decision that is reserved for council rather than this committee. So there are 3 options outlined in the report, along with the respective risks and benefits. So the first one is about the opt-in to the PSAA option. There's also a second option there about making a standalone appointment, and a third option in terms of setting up an auditor panel and having local joint procurement arrangements with other authorities. Now, there have been some national issues over the last couple of years with the timely completion of local authority audits. But my view is that I don't think this is down to the national contract arrangements. There have been a variety of factors that have impacted that timely completion. And therefore, I do believe that we should coordinate our efforts through the national arrangements with other councils so that we can tackle all these changes collectively. So the recommendation within the report is to continue to opt into the PSAA option. One or two of the councils in Suffolk have already made their decision and they will be opting into the PSA arrangement, and it looks like the others are likely to do the same when they have their council meetings as well. So that would mean that we wouldn't necessarily have anyone locally that we could do a joint procurement with if we wanted to look at one of the other options. The LGA's view is also that the national procurement remains the best option for local authorities, and so I would certainly support that view. So that's really all I want to say in terms of introducing the report, Chair, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. A question for me, do we have any option or choice in the cost, or if we opt in and we have who we get and we pay the ongoing rate, I take it? There's no competitive aspect to this at all, really, is there?
The competitive aspect is in terms of the contract procurement in the first place, because obviously the major audit firms will be competing for those contracts. So depending on what bids they actually submit, that's where the competition aspect comes. The PSAA themselves are the body that set the fees each year. So and that's been the case for a number of years. It's either been PSAA in recent years or the Audit Commission before that. So as I say, we've never had the ability to set the fee level ourselves.
I think the slight worry, Catherine, is that I'm not sure that these people really want to do it. You know, they it seems they're struggling to meet deadlines, don't they? And it's something they do that probably incurs on other work they do. That I'm just sort of wondering slightly how much they want to do it, and they may try and sort of hike the price to reflect that they don't care one way or the other. Is that a reasonably fair assumption?
I think, as I put in the report, I think there may be some increase in fees compared to where fees currently are, but I think that was likely to happen without the re-procurement nationally, because there are additional burdens on audit firms and new requirements that they have to comply with. So, you know, there is more that they have to do in terms of an audit. This is big business, so I can anticipate that the big firms, again, will still be interested. I know they have suffered over the last couple of years, you know, with having the right skills and expertise and losing staff. But I know all of them have been doing a big recruitment campaign, you know, to try and replace that. So, as I say, when you're talking about the number of local authorities across the country, this is still big business for those firms, and I'm sure they must make some return on the contract, or else they wouldn't be interested in bidding for it. And there certainly was the interest last time around, but it may have a slight upwards pressure in terms of the costs for this time around.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Well, that's probably enough myself. How do other people on the committee think? Quite important, this one. James.
Thank you, Bryn. Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said. I think we've got to be careful with this particular contract that we make sure that we're getting good value for money. And it would be easy, I think, to there's several companies that are able to do this kind of audit. So I think with something like this, I'd like to see at least 3 sort of offers, including definitely the PSAA, but also other people capable of handling it, because yeah, for me, I think it's all about value for money, and if we can actually compare three different, I just say three different options, because that's what I think is sensible. You know, you don't want too many, and I think three is just about where we want to be. We can look at it and just make sure that we're getting that value for money. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Melanie.
Chair, if I could just perhaps clarify one point on that. The option that I've recommended as the preferred one of opting in with PSAA means that they would actually undertake the procurement exercise. So they are the ones that would be seeing the bids. Once we've said if we're going to opt in, then we wouldn't actually have an involvement in the tendering procurement exercise. So they would obviously be the ones that see, you know, get the comparisons from the audit firms. There is actually a limited number of audit firms that are registered to be able to undertake local government audits. I think it may be only about 5 of the large audit firms that say are registered to undertake it. And I think the best option of getting that value for money is being part of the national procurement, because you've then got those economies of scale of us all coming together. So I think we're more likely to get value for money that way than if we tried to do something locally ourselves.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. It is 5. It was that couple of years ago when I went on the training, and I don't think it's changed. So that is 5. Yes, Melanie, please, your views on this.
Yeah, I think the description of the modelling, that the offer that PPSA offer seems a logical move to go towards that, when you consider how inconvenient it could be to the council to try and secure people with the capacity and the right skills to form a sort of a panel for selecting a firm, all quite sort of risky, really, as to whether we could even secure that panel and then obtain the bids and scrutinise them satisfactorily when you've got an oven-ready system ready to go that will operate that. And I presume they don't charge a fee. Is that is there a fee with the public sector option?
No, there isn't.
Yeah, so I think I mean I'm not hearing anything that deters me from going for that sort of a model that seems to be set up exactly how we need it to operate to make our lives a bit easier. So,
thank you, Melanie. Well put. Mike, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at recommendation 3.2. The PSAA are described as a sector-led body, and their full name is Public Sector Order Appointments Limited. My question is this a company with a limited liability then? I'm thinking about the unlikely event of this all going pear-shaped, and who actually makes up this company?
They are actually a very small company that it's a government appointed body that's been set up, and the government set them up, say, after the Audit Commission was wound up. So this is the body that replaced. So as say, they are a government body, and they are actually quite a small. I couldn't tell you exactly how large they are, but I think the employees may be a handful, because when I've contacted them in the past, when I've had any questions, you know, they refer to only a handful of people that actually work there. So, you know, I think it is quite a small operation. I'd probably need to look a little bit more into the background as to how they're limited. But as I say, they are government appointed, so the government are the ones that would, in essence, have to support them or bail them out if they got into any difficulties.
Yeah, thank you. Just sort of supplementary to that then, if the government set them up, and this is a company with a limited liability, does the government take any responsibility?
I don't know that level of detail in terms of how they were set up in the first place, but I can take that question away and have a look at it.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a supplementary, Catherine. Have they got a record? Have they been going for 2 or 3 years, or is it the current government now that set them up, which might worry me?
They've been going since our audit contract went external in 2016, so they were set up prior to 2016 to do the last lot of national procurement contracts. So they have been running for a good 5 to 6 years now. Okay, well, that's slightly reassuring. Mary, I still have a hand up from you. Is that a current hand?
No, Chair, that's, yeah. I just want to support this PSAA suggestion, recommendation, because while I understand my colleagues might be concerned about value for money, I think to do anything like that locally, we would be restricting ourselves to skilled professionals. And while we may have to pay for it, I think as a council we should be supporting the best that is available to undertake the audit. And locally, I'm not sure that we've got that breadth of opportunity from local companies. Thank you.
Yes, I think we all agree with that, basically, Mary. James?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Norris brings quite a good point about the limited on the end of this public sector audit appointments limited. I would like to know a little bit more about that. But what it did concern me when I saw this, that this could be a bit like a mortgage provider that says you can you'll have to use, I don't know, one of 4 legal companies to convey a house or something like that. You sometimes have to be a little bit careful that there is when there are other options, because this PSAA could easily focus on certain companies and leave other ones out, and that would be the worry that we're not getting value for money. But Catherine has said that there's, or I think that was you, the Chairman, has said that there's 5 companies that are capable of doing this, and if the PSAA are using every single company that are capable of doing this, I'm quite happy with the way this is set out. It's just I do see sometimes with these kind of things they concentrate on a few of the main companies and give them all their business, and it's not always the best value for money like that. But if Catherine could just reassure me on that.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Councillor. What happened last time around was that the contracts were split up into regional bids. So it wasn't just one contract that was let nationally. It was grouped into different regional areas, and I think that enabled the big firms to bid for what they wanted to in terms of the contracts. So there are, I'm aware of 3, 4, I think, of the big firms that are currently operating under this regime. So they have all managed to secure some of that work nationally, and hence you've still got that element of competition in the market. It hasn't all gone to just one of the big firms. So hopefully that'll sort of reassure you, and I'm guessing they will do something similar with this latest procurement in terms of having lots that the companies can bid for.
Yeah, I think that's quite reassuring, and other councillors have actually said quite a good point, which is this is a far simpler way of doing it than getting involved maybe and having to push our knowledge to understand what we're actually doing. So yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, James. I think we've all got a wish to be independent and try and save money, but it would probably end in an utter mess. So I think we probably are best to go with the professionals, and accept and endorse this. Does everybody agree with that? I just need to know if somebody doesn't.
Yes.
I do.
Yes, happy with that, Chair.
Yes, well, I think so too. I raised some issues, but I'm just being devil's advocate, really. As long as, and I suppose, Catherine, we will get another chance to finally accept this, or is it done and dusted as far as we're concerned? We will get to know who wins the contract and have some influence, I take it.
We will be informed, and usually it's whether we have any sort of conflict of interest with the audit firm that is being proposed, you know, whether we have any other arrangements sort of with them or any contractual other than the audit work. So yes, we will be notified as to who that is before they are actually appointed.
Yeah, that's fine then. Okay, thank you everybody for that. There's no issues, and I think we've done our best to raise concerns on that one, and I'm sure they'll be noted. Now, item 9 is the forward plan, everybody. That's last item on the agenda today. I've had a look at that, and yes, looks pretty interesting for the next 2 meetings. Any comments, please? I think, did somebody say there was a change to one of the items? Was it you, Catherine, said there would be a change for the March meeting? Is that correct?
Yes, Chair. At the moment on the March meeting, you have got the annual audit letter for 2021 and the statement of accounts and auditors report. I had previously just asked that to be moved forward to May because the auditors haven't started our audit of those accounts yet, so it won't be ready to come in March.
So it's moved back to May in effect then, isn't it?
Yes, and depending on when they do finally start, we may have to keep that under review, but we'll put it on the May one for the time being.
I think last year ended up being about September, is that correct?
I think possibly July, I think, from memory, but yes, it was late.
Yes, hopefully the pressures might be a little less. Yes, and well, we'll keep a watch on that. Hopefully it could be May, but prepare to be surprised or not surprised. Anything else, members, that we've only gone up to the May. There's nothing for it. Well, that's the end of the council then, isn't it? So hopefully we'll all be here at that time.
Yeah, when we've had the timetable of meetings for the next year, Chair, I shall fill all of the forward planning for all of the meetings ongoing.
That's fine, Mandy. Thank you very much for that. Well, that concludes the meeting. We've given a steer and done what we can in this virtual meeting. Thank you very much to everybody. And I wish you a good day, and we'll see you soon. Enjoy all.